pretty unusual. The other things that are in E flat are saxophones.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Saxophones in this. So
Right.
whenever I had to play with a saxophone player and I didn't want to have to actually transpose at sight, pick up the E flat. Here's an E flat. Now, a little story about E flats. They're hard to find, and they were around all the time. In about the 1950s, they were used by school systems to start kids on flute because they couldn't reach the C flute. So they bought some E flats. Unfortunately, the sound quality and the transposition made it kind of hard, and they end up at the back of the closet in most schools. These days, people will kill to get them because they want to be able to play them in flute groups. And they are, in general, not being produced. Every once in a while, somebody will make one or two of one of the major manufacturers. This particular one I actually bought off a flute maker, but it's an old Artley, which might be a familiar name to some people who played flute a long time ago. It's a school flute.
Interesting, interesting.
But they're really hard to get these days. Now, that's what an E flat sounds like. Now, to hear the other kind of flute that sort of sounds a bit different than the flute you're kind of used to hearing,
Right.
is my bass.
Okay.
And a bass flute's in C, so it's in the same key as the C flute.
Right.
But it starts an octave lower.
Looks like a bassoon, only in metal.
Yeah, most people usually think it's plumbing, along with that one. Bass flutes have been getting much more popular, and you're going to start to see them a lot more often. They're another one where people kind of like the sound. I'm going to give you a little bit of a bass flute part here. Actually, I was going to also do Shades of Senate, I think. So this is a familiar tune. And just a little bit of some more.
So the deeper sound comes because it goes through that cylinder on the top?
Two things. It's longer in length than that flute.
Yes.
It's wider in bore
Okay.
than that flute.
Okay.
So you get both.
And the loop on the top?
The loop is made so that you can hold it. Because if you straighten this out the way this is straightened out, you'd never
you'll
be able
in the
to
next
balance
room.
it.
Okay, I got you.
And I got to tell you, this is a fairly light bass. My first bass has one less key on it, so it's actually a little bit lighter. And then I have one that was made in 1962 by Rudel Cart, and it's a tremendous bass. It's really good sound, but it weighs a ton. And if you were to hold it up for an hour, your arm would hurt.
So one of the changes that has happened over the years is that the metals that they use for these instruments have gotten lighter?
Not the metals that they use, but the actual tubing has gotten thinner and lighter. So they can draw the tubing so that they can make a lighter instrument.
Is that true for all metal instruments, or is that just no?
And it depends. And bores, they've been playing around with the size of the bore as well. And the placement of the holes. And again, there's where technology is helping so that they can determine both the size and the placement of the holes more accurately and get better pitch. They're also making some out of plastic these days.
Really?
In order to get the weight down.
Okay. And how's the sound?
I'll take my metal one.
Okay. All right.
But they're getting better.
Now, would any of them be then made in wood like the piccolo?
Not generally. I actually have seen a partially wood body on a bass. That's a relatively old bass, a bass from probably around the 1950s to early 60s.
Is it much heavier? Is that one of the?
I've seen a picture of it. That's
Okay.
in general now, they're all made either out of metal or they're going towards various kinds of plastics for
And
the
what's the
bodies.
metal? What is it?
Silver plate over brass.
Okay.
This is gold. That's granadillo wood. This is solid silver head, plated body, and this is silver plated over everything. This is silver plate over brass.
Interesting.
And then there's my PVC that I don't have here, which is bigger, and it literally is made out of plumbing tubing and brass keys.
Interesting. All right, you going to play for us this big sucker?
Yeah, here comes my contrabass, which
Now,
is also in
how do
C.
you move that around? Does it come apart?
It comes in 5 pieces, thank goodness.
Okay.
I got to tell you, the plastic one comes in 5 pieces, but most of it is in 1 piece.
Oh, okay.
And this huge case, and after I bought that in 2001, and just last year I got this, the Contra, because it's a real instrument. It's actually made by a woman in the Netherlands, Eva Kingma. She makes this bass too. I met her at National Flute Association convention in Washington, D.C., and got to talk to her and tried her Contra. She had started making Contras not long before, and I ordered one.
Interesting. Okay, let's hear this baby.
Here's my Contra bass. As you can hear, it's like a string bass.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
And here's a little bit of some more Mancini. It's like playing a string bass, really.
Well, but except that you don't have to breathe. You just have to go like this.
Yes, and I did a duet with a string bass player last year, just to kind of...
Because the bass is probably as tall as that is.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
But I can tell you, he can play a lot louder. He could dominate me. But we're getting there. It has been suggested, and I've seen other instruments actually mic'd to bring up the volume. It depends on the space. And my PVC bass actually has a setup for a microphone in it.
Inside of it.
Inside
okay.
of it.
All right. So
But
when you start out as you want to say you want to play the flute, what would you start with as a
C flute.
C flute?
Now, they do make the C flutes now with curved heads
Really?
for young players, and that's especially for very small kids around 7, 8. And there is now a Suzuki flute program for even 3-year-olds. I have some doubts about that, but yeah, these days they actually make a curved head so that it's closer. Again, you're not out here.
Ah, okay.
You'll see most poor little flute players don't have the strength
Yeah.
to hold their flutes up at the correct angle. So that's been a great boon.
Really?
For teaching, to be able to put a curved head on
And it doesn't change the sound.
No, the tone quality is probably not as good.
Okay.
But for a beginner,
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't make a whole lot of difference.
Yes.
And then you can change to have the straight head later on.
Because originally you would start at 6, 7, 8 with the one in your hands.
Well, usually this is an open hole, flute. Most of the time people start with a plateau system, which is the keys are closed.
Okay.
And actually many professional players will play with closed holes as well. The open holes are mainly for doing more contemporary extended techniques, and some people think it sounds better. I've played on both closed and open hole, and tone quality is more a function of the head than anything else, but in order to do extended techniques, you need the open hole.
Okay.
But plenty of players play on plateau system, closed hole, and most students start on plateau system would be like this, but in the key of C.
Okay.
So closed hole.
And the reason, is there a rationale for that?
C flute is what is scored for bands and orchestras most frequently.
Okay. Is there now, you're talking about these flute orchestras, is there now an interest by composers to compose?
Oh yes, about the last 8 or 9 years, there's been a burgeoning of composers writing for flute ensembles of varying signs. Flute choir, sometimes it's called a flute choir, sometimes it's called a flute ensemble, sometimes it's called a flute orchestra. They are pretty much synonymous in terms of their instrumentation. Generally, the flute orchestra will have more of a range, like I have the E flat. It's rare for that to be in most groups. Most flute groups have a preponderance of C flutes.
Okay.
And maybe an alto, maybe a bass. These days, it's getting much more popular. Obviously, there are many, many flute players out there. If we in Connecticut come up with, there were like 54 people in attendance at a flute class several months ago in Middletown. And that wasn't like all the people who could have been there.
Right.
We're putting up 15 professional level players to play a variety of instruments, and they're limited to their choice of being a Connecticut resident. We had people from outside of Connecticut wanting to play, and we said,
no,
we've got plenty of our own folks who are qualified.
Right.
And I know there's many more people out in the woodwork that I haven't found their names yet, and we want to keep this group going. But we need to create opportunities for these flute players. We're turning out tremendous players out of the Hart School, out of, I went to Boston University, New England, I was accepted at New England Conservatory. Out of all of these schools are coming tremendous players who are trained so well. And you have doctoral students fighting for a place in a non-paid, non-professional orchestra.
Right.
So here's our opportunity. Let's put a bunch of really good flute players up on stage and let's have some fun. And I look at this Connecticut Flute Orchestra as a win-win proposition, actually a win-win-win proposition. Great flute players, we can get together, play great music, and present it to an audience, something a little bit different, and music that you would probably only hear at a National Flute Convention, and hear well, by the way, at a flute convention. But we should play it for other audiences, not just for other flute players.
Right.
And proceeds of the ticket are going to help sponsor somebody who can't afford private lessons out of a public school.
Oh, very nice.
So,
very nice.
I'm really excited for this first concert.
Right.
And it really came out of the germ of idea of, there's all these great sessions we put together at National Flute Association, and I know there's tremendous numbers of flute orchestras in Florida and in California. And most other states, there's 2, I think, in Massachusetts. And what about Connecticut? Why aren't we doing it?
Right.
And we can do it better. At least we want to try.
Is it something that you have a card-carrying membership in? Is that how you even find these people?
The membership came from word of mouth, came from people.
Okay.
It was by invitation, and we were looking for a certain level of player.
Right.
We also don't want to denigrate any existing groups, and we're not trying to. A number of us play in all kinds of other groups.
Right.
This was to be something special. We're only going to do it a few times a year. We're going to do it with limited rehearsals, but we're going to do it with the best people we can possibly get, but also who want to work together. So that's also one of the requirements. We need to get people who are willing to say, well, let the other person play the solo this time. It's a very cordial group of people.
A little sharing there,
Right,
the spotlight.
and it also takes the pressure off. You know, the first flute player in an orchestra has a tremendous amount of pressure on them. They're playing all the solos through an hour and a half or 2 hour program. Well, here we can spread it out. And we can also spread out the types of flutes. We're rotating in this concert people between alto and bass and C flute to give them a break off of one of the lower instruments. The lower instrument parts, although they're getting better because the composers are getting better, a lot of times can be a little bit boring. They're absolutely necessary though. But sometimes you don't want to leave that person on a concert for an hour and a half of playing just contra. You want to give them a chance to play a flute solo.
Right.
So we're doing that.
So it's going to be like a band. People are going to stand up and then just play their particular little piece.
No. It's not like a jazz band. It's much more like a concert orchestra performance. It is a concert orchestra performance.
And you're playing in the big auditorium, so you've got lots of spaces for people to show up.
We've got lots of space for people to show up. There's 450 seats, I believe. And we'd like to fill them all.
Yes.
And it's going to be a really interesting concert. Just to give you a little bit, let me give you some titles here.
Yes, absolutely. Tell us
what the program's going to be like.
Going to be.
And I can give you a little bit about some of the people. We're opening with a fanfare. It's called Fanfare 36, and it's by Kelly Vaya, who is a piccolo player out of Atlanta. I've met him. He's actually been up here in Connecticut before because we premiered with my Black Ledge Flutes group a suite of his French Christmas carols that he had arranged. Great guy. He runs the National Flute Association high school flute choir, and I think he now does the college flute choir as well. So, and he also does composing and arranging.
Right.
And the fanfare is his own composition. We're doing a fugue by David Bailey, who is the conductor of one of I think it's the New Hampshire Flute Choir, and that has our E-flat flutes. And we have two of them, so we're going to show off two E-flat flutes.
Tell the kids to go through the closets and find out if there's some spare instruments.
In their schools, whether they have any. They can make some money because people are looking for them. We're going to play the Verdi Othello ballet music, which is arranged by Charles Benmier, who is also a flute player and composer, now living in Florida, and he has arranged many full orchestra pieces for flute ensemble.
Do you think that it takes an actual player to be able to compose music for an instrument like this? No?
Any composer can do it. They'd have to do their research, and it wouldn't hurt to talk to flute players, but they don't have to be a flute player.
But is it the ordinary that they would be? Is it more the norm that they would be someone?
Well, they are because of the way this has come about. So flute orchestras have kind of come about through the national flute conventions, and also there used to be flute bands, and they probably still are. England was very big on flute bands, the way Connecticut is on drum and fife and drum corps. Well, England has flute bands, and they have sizes that I don't have here.
Wow.
And they have for years. James Galway came out of the flute bands.
Okay. For anybody who doesn't know, he's probably one of the most famous
flute players these days, anyway. And so that tradition has been around for some time. It's beginning to blossom in the United States because there are so many fine young flutists and us older folks too, that have been around a while, that just want to play and want to keep playing, but we want to play at a higher level. I don't want to disparage my colleagues, but many times the flute section is the best section in a lot of these local amateur groups.
Okay, the community bands and community orchestras.
And they kind of want a place to play that the level is a little bit higher. And this is intended to give it the opportunity to do that.
This is the equity version of an orchestra.
That's right, instead of the community playhouse.
Right.
We need the community playhouses, and some of them are excellent.
Yes, and it's a good...
Not to disparage them, they go all year round. This is not what this is intended to be.
Right.
In fact, this is intended to be a boost for those. It's like, do this, and maybe at some point you might, get to play in the Connecticut Flute Orchestra. Other pieces on the program, Melodια the Neumes by Stephen Lias, who is not a flute player. And it's a full-length work, very interesting. And The Lone Arranger by Philip Boutel, which is an interesting piece. It has come and you'll hear little pieces of other pieces within this work.
Oh,
but
okay.
It starts out sounding like The Lone Arranger.
Oh, okay.
Okay, The Lone Ranger. And then it dissolves into some other pieces and kind of ends back with dum da 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 da. But very cute. And Catherine McMichael, who I mentioned, flute players love. She's not a flute player.
Oh.
She has written many works for flute, but she's not a flute player. Her Silver Celebration is what we're going to play, and it was written for an NFA convention. And then Talisman, which is a relatively new piece by Alexandra Molnar Suhadja. She has started to come into her own as a composer, I think in the last 3 or 4 years, and has been featured in a number of National Flute Association works that have received prizes. And then we're going to end with the full Pink Panther suite because it's fun.
So you chose the program.
I chose this program. Hopefully our next one will be by committee.
Okay, and you picked these pieces, why?
Actually, I went and listened to them. I picked some of them in order to highlight the instrumentation. I picked some of them because they won awards, and I wanted to feature them on the program.
Oh, okay.
I picked some of them because I know they're the composers, and I knew their work was good.
Interesting.
So there's a mix.
Yeah, okay. So how would someone who's not a flute player sit down and compose a piece for flutes?
Well, they may have a melody and tunes
They-
in
and
their
they-
head to
and then
begin
they
with,
think- and they think
then
it-
it's a matter of what is the instrumentation capable of, and that's easy enough to look up online.
Okay.
And you can listen to samples just like I was listening. Love YouTube. I mean, it's one of the best inventions for musicians there is. When I was a kid, I'd have to go to a library and try to take probably a scratchy record out.
Right.
Right? If I could get a hold of one. Now you can go on and listen to everything. So these young composers, they can listen to all kinds of things and all kinds of performances. It's getting easier to write for instrumentation that you may not have familiarity with. So,
But something obviously tickles their fancy about a flute.
well, there's lots of flute players. Here's we come back to, look at all the flute players in various bands and schools.
Right.
There's lots of them.
So what happens? They
So
need to play.
give them something to play.
Yes, I see.
I play in a band. I actually play oboe in a band. They're pretty close to 20 flute players in that band now. I'm one of 2 oboists. And the levels in community bands vary all over the place, but a lot of those flute players are very fine, very well-trained flute players.
And they just don't have opportunities
And
to
that's
play.
their opportunity. There's nothing
Yes.
wrong with it.
Right.
But, be nice to give them some more opportunities.
Right.
And for players like in the Hartford Symphony, because they're on our roster, although they're not playing this concert, it's another opportunity for them, particularly as we try to go as professional as possible.
Right.
Quite honestly, we want this to be a paid organization at some point. All right?
Right.
Because that's the level we're looking for. And the good thing is we have that level in this state. The bad thing is we don't have enough opportunities for them.
Right.
And a lot of the orchestras are getting cut. Witness our Hartford Symphony Orchestra. We need to find more opportunities for them. And if the administration in Hartford won't help find them opportunities, then it behooves some of the rest of us to go ahead and do that as well.
Wow. Well, we're talking about a starving musician. So my daughter, the cellist, actually gave it up. She applied to the finest music schools in the country, and when they didn't accept her for the music program, they said she could come to the university and then just audition for the orchestra. She decided, and she hasn't played since she graduated from high school. But at the same time, she got all that wonderful education there. But my mother used to say, God rest her soul, because she's now passed away. She said, what do you want a starving musician for? So she became a doctor. And she became a doctor, I think, because she learned skills from being a musician that were able to be transferred into studying well enough and to
And you
getting
can always
into,
go back and play in a community orchestra.
well, we gave her back the cello, her best cello. We used to have 3 of them in the house at one time. We gave her back the best one, and she actually said when she gets a little time, she'll actually go maybe take a lesson or 2 to.
Right,
And
and
she's
go
got to
back
get
to
those
a
callous
community
fingers
orchestra.
back. Exactly.
Because and you can always do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can also start an instrument later in life.
Oh yes, yes.
Okay, I didn't play oboe until pretty recently, and I played recorder and put it down, and now I'm playing in a recorder ensemble as well. And I used to play in doctors' orchestra in New York. There were plenty of doctors who kept music up. You know what their schedule's like. They couldn't do it. Most of them couldn't do it through all of their schooling and afterwards. But at some point they came back and they're playing in the doctor's orchestra. And as a young kid, I was sitting in the flute section playing with some really pretty phenomenal doctor violinists, cellists, and violists. And we actually had some really good fine soloists on that orchestra. So you can always do music.
Yes, and you should always try and do music. It's just good for you.
It's good for your brain. They've done studies. I don't know how many times they publish the studies, and I keep going, I could have told you that.
Yes, exactly.
It just keeps your brain so much more alive. And I can tell you, having gone to oboe now, and the fingerings there are some similar, but there's a lot of differences.
Right.
Boy, does it keep your brain like having to think.
Exactly, exactly. So I want to thank Helene Rosenblatt for coming here today.
Thank you.
Now, we want everybody to get out there September 17th. Here it is.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. at Wesleyan University. So it's in Middletown, easy to get to, right off of Major Road. Go there Sunday afternoon.
Plenty
early
of parking
evening.
there.
Exactly. There's some nice places to eat dinner, and go ahead and enjoy this flute orchestra, and then come back and do more of it. You can get in touch with Helene if you unfortunately can't make this orchestra performance, and try and make another one. So we have some email addresses for you to contact Helene and her group, so you can find out about other ones. And September 17th must be a very popular day, because I just wanted to let my audience know that in my other persona as Anastasia Goodman, the mystery writer, I'm having a reading. It's The Battle of Stalingrad, according to Sasha Perloff, who is my fictional New York City police detective born in Russia. And we will talk about the Battle of Stalingrad, the real battle, and also I will read passages, because my books are full of these stories of survivors of the Battle of Stalingrad, which my character, because in fact Russian people in general think it was the turning point of World War II, and their great sacrifices are the ones that saved the world from the Nazis. So it'll be an interesting discussion. Come on down. It's at the Babcock Smith House, which is a historical museum in Westerly, Rhode Island. Remember, September 17th, that's a very great day. You can come to mine, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Stay an hour, learn about the Battle of Stalingrad, get to know my character, Sasha Perloff, then hop in your car and go to Wesleyan and get your ears full of the music of the flute. It's like being immersed in passages from the Bible. It just reads like that. So enjoy the flutes, enjoy Sasha Perloff. Keep that date in mind, September 17th. We got a whirl of events, and this is just the start of the fall. Fall season means all kinds of things, music, theater, art, everything happening. We hope to have it on our show. So I thank you. This is Harriet Grayson, your host and producer of Community Culture Showcase. Remember September 17th, and keep us in mind. Good night.